I haven't quite left the Somme yet, we're on our way out, and here we're passing Coer British Cemetery, which, remember, the Somme didn't just all finish in July 1916 during the Kaiser Spring Offensive, which was the last throw of the dice as far as the Germans were concerned, having been reinforced by all the forces from the Eastern Front following the German-Russian armistice. It was their last chance, and so this is in spring 1918, and this colonnaded, very impressive memorial. These are the names of nearly 15,000 British and South African soldiers who were never recovered, plus all the graves that are in here. Spring Offensive came to a grinding halt at the Second Battle of the Marne, when the British and French, the Empire forces, and the by this stage supported by the Americans, held the Germans back. It was then that the tide started to turn. Just up the road is the Tank Corps Memorial, which commemorates the first occasion which tanks were used in battle, and this was in September 1916. 44 tanks have been shipped over from the UK in great secrecy. 18 of them were used here at Coer, and the 9 in front and 9 behind, and the Germans were just, they'd never seen anything like this before, and just simply terrified, which allowed the British to make significant gain, not to actually take the battle itself, but very close to it. But it wasn't until Cambrai, which we're going to come on to shortly, as the first proper main tank battle. Behind the Australian windmill cemetery is the Animal War Memorial that was put in place by the Australians in memory of the estimated 9 million, but nobody really knows, animals died during the First War. You'll be familiar with horses were used, obviously, extensively. Mules, donkeys, dogs were used. towing, pulling things, as in the Vosges Mountains, as we mentioned earlier. Search and rescue, rat catching and companions. Pigeons were used as carrying. Cats were used in the trenches for rat catching. They didn't really have much choice. So now at the site of the first proper tank battle, the Battle of Cambrai. This is a garden of peace, which is some vertical metal poles. I'm not quite sure what the significance is. Unfortunately, the visitor centre is closed, only open in the afternoons. We're here in the mornings, but on the 17th of November 1917, the Germans, having retreated back to the hugely reinforced Hindenburg line, conducting policy of scorched earth in the process, 476 British tanks attacked Hindenburg line and broke through. They were unable to maintain, unfortunately, the momentum. But it's a historical site. I'm not quite sure what these all mean. And the Vimy Ridge site, and the tunnels the Canadians used to get to the observation trenches. Now on top of Vimy Ridge, and this is no man's land, so that's Canadian line, front line there, German front line there, 25 metres apart. These craters are created by underground fighting, where the Germans and the British and for the French would have dug tunnels underneath the opposition tunnel and then blown explosives, and the ground would collapse through. So this was a site of the 4 divisions of the Canadian forces who successfully took Vimy Ridge. And we're now walking across to the German lines here. These craters are just huge all the way along. And here we are, the German lines, which are much more heavily fortified because they've been in place since 1914 with observation posts with the covering here. This is the Vimy Ridge Visitor Centre, which is extremely well resourced and given a guided tour by college students from Canada. Excellent presentation. And this is really just a huge site. The Canadians really obviously take a huge amount of pride in the efforts of their forces here. And their losses proportionately were far greater than the British. Impressive monument at Vimy Ridge, commemorating 9th of April 1917, when the 4 divisions took on Vimy Ridge. They suffered about 10,000 casualties. It's just a very narrow sector, but they achieved their objectives. Canadian national pride. As you get closer to the monument, you get a idea of how spectacular it is, and you can see at the top weeping angels. There's one person on steps there, which shows how high it is. And then you can also see the importance of the ridge from the Germans' point of view, because it protected the Douai plain with all the coal mines, and you can still see the slag heap there. And as we approach the monument itself, have the names of all the fallen. This commemorates all the Canadians who lost their lives through the First War. The Canadian forces, in fact, were British born, immigrated. A lot would have been from Ireland. Around the monument. The valour of their countrymen in the Great War, over the 60,000 dead in Canada, which put into perspective a population of 6 million. So, about 1% of the entire population. And the underground caves in Arras, extended by the New Zealand tunnellers up to the German lines. And there's Trish in a very fetching tin hat.
Far too young, officer cadets replaced the officers killed in the first years of the war. Bitter minds and molecules bring up. He asked to join us. He didn't have to pay. He smiled and wrote out his lie. 1819. Deceased young men were exposed to relentless shooting.
La première partie du groupe peut nous rejoindre par ici.
In which the fighters are buried on both sides of their backline. The front line must